Welcome to the Walden podcast, where we talk about entrepreneurship, the great outdoors, and then more importantly, living a life with intention. Today, I've got David Krawitz. He's a photographer. He's a apprentice falconer. He's doing a lot of cool stuff. David, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself.
Hi everyone. I'm David. As Marcus said, I'm an apprentice falconer. I'm an amateur photographer, a professional wildlife biologist, an avian ecologist, and an upland hunter and outdoorsman.
Let's go. So many things, really. So many things. Where to start? Let's start with marine biology. Really, you're located in what? Central California, is that right?
So I'm between Central and Northern California, and not much of a marine biologist, more terrestrial. But yeah, I do some fishery stuff. But
So tell me what the day in the life of a terrestrial biologist looks like.
for me, I mostly manage an eagle mortality monitoring program. So we're looking at bird mortality on wind energy and solar energy facilities.
So like
But
the
yeah,
wind turbines hitting bald
yeah,
eagles, is that what we're talking about,
yeah,
really?
exactly. And
No
it's
way.
I'll just say real quick because I can't talk too much about it. It's not nearly as bad as people would think. The offshore stuff, it's happening in the ocean, pretty gnarly. A lot of birds are dying. The stuff on land is not nearly as bad as like news would have it be.
Unbelievable. I haven't even read that in the news. I never even thought about the wind turbines hitting bald freaking eagles. That should be
Yeah,
against the law.
yeah. No, they it's all regulated. It's that's why I'm out there.
Fun. So, what are you looking for? You're looking for down birds that have been hit by wind
Yeah,
turbines? Is that it?
yeah. We're looking for golden eagles and birds that have been injured or killed. And on the injured ones, obviously, the falconry experience. I'm able to go take them to a rehab center, and yeah, usually we get them into the hands of another licensed falconer to rehab them, get them hunting again, and release them.
Unbelievable. I never would have even crossed my mind.
Yeah,
So
unless go on.
now that we are on the topic of falconry, I didn't realize you had to apprentice to be a falconer, but I learned this
Absolutely.
yesterday from the podcast from episode one. Tell me more about that. How long do you have to apprentice? What's it like to find, what do they call them? Master falconers?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it difficult finding people that will take you on as their apprentice? I mean, walk me through how that even happens, really.
So I'll start off by saying falconry, in the grand scheme of things, is a very new sport in North America compared to Europe and East Asia, where it's been practiced for thousands of years. We're really just getting our feet wet with a couple hundred years of practice here. So we're trying out a lot of new things. And compared to Europe, where you really don't need to do an apprenticeship, you can just buy a bird from a breeder. It's super regulated here. Every state will manage it a little bit differently under broad federal regulations, but in California, the way that it works and the way it would work most places is you would first see if your state has a local club, which almost every state does. However, like for example, I think North Dakota might have like 30 falconers total, whereas California is more so in the hundreds. So you're dealing with two different situations of how close is someone to you that's going to be willing to walk you through all the steps. Is it going to be something where they sponsor you and it's just over the phone, or will it be all in person and really hands on? That's a state by state basis. For me in California and a lot of the Western states where we do have a pretty big falconry practice, you're going to find your state club. They usually have what's called an apprentice chair, or like an apprentice board member, someone who deals with people interested in the sport, bringing them into the sport. You'd have this conversation where they would assess how realistic of an activity it is for you if you have the lifestyle that you can dedicate to a bird of prey. A lot of people come into this thinking it's pet keeping. They're all into Renaissance fairs or Harry Potter, and they want to have an
Sure.
owl.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, so they'll make sure that you're willing to hunt, you're willing to dispatch game, put your bird into opportunities where they can kill game. Once you kind of clear that sort of litmus test, they would essentially either put it onto you or help you along the process of finding someone who's willing to walk you through the steps before even saying they're going to sponsor you, which is going to be taking a test. Every state has a falconry test. I think it's about 100 questions. You have to get 80% right. It's 80 questions right.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think in some states you can start this thing at as early as 12 years old. So you'd think, oh, it's going to be an easy
Really?
test. And even as someone who does raptor work professionally, I think I only got like an 83, and
Really?
I studied my ass off for it.
You're
So
I mean, you're
yeah,
a bird biologist, really,
yes.
and even for you, that's wild. So, can you own one as soon as you're an apprentice, or do you have to be a master before you can technically own a bird of prey?
No, you can. I've had two birds so far, and I'm at the end of my first year, beginning of my second year of my apprenticeship. Um, I guess I could give I won't take up too much time, but I'll give the other little steps just for the listeners.
Yes, please
You'd,
do.
you'd find your person, someone who's willing to walk you through it. You'd pass the test. Then in every state, you're going to have your game warden come out. They're going to assess your facilities, do a little checklist. And then once you get the stamp of approval and your actual license in hand from your game and fish department, to answer your thing, you can go out and trap your own bird. States will differ. For the most part, they're going to limit you to an American kestrel or a red-tailed hawk. But in some of the southern states where we have like Harris hawk or Harris's hawk, which is native and you can catch them from the wild, that bird may be allowed for an apprentice because they're really, if for the people new to falconry, the Harris's hawk is like almost dog-like. They're extremely trainable. They hunt in packs, so people will hunt 3 or 4 of them together and really willing to work with you and with the dog.
Fun. Interesting. I'm into it. I follow some different falconers
Mm-hmm.
on Instagram and I watch that all the time. I'd love to go at least see somebody run one. Tell me this. You trap the bird. Then
Yeah.
what? Do you home them like pigeons or will it ever accept you as its family or no?
It all depends on what type of bird. With what I've dealt with, red-tailed hawks, they're pretty steadfast. They they're never going to love you, and I think that we anthropomorphize a lot of animals like dogs, which I think
Sure.
dogs do love us. It's
I
like
do.
pretty apparent, when they look at you.
Agreed.
But a bird of prey sees you as something that provides it food to some degree, puts it into opportunities to get food. And then there's always a relationship of respect, even with some of these more headstrong birds like a red tail or any of the accipiters, which in North America would be a Cooper's hawk, goshawk, or a sharp-shinned. It's like a respect relationship and a cooperative relationship based on their understanding that you respect them, they respect you. Falcons are a little bit different. They're a little bit more dog-like. They might be more affectionate. And then the Harris's hawks are a whole different world where, yeah. But
So a falcon's what you got to go with. What then? You get it a leash and you hook it up to its leg. How are they for picking up chicks?
so I guess, and I didn't fully answer your other question. It's when you trap them. You trap them on a wide variety of traps. It all depends on what your license is. So I can take a passage bird. That's something that's within its first year of life or its first migratory passage. I'm never going to get it to home into me. Like if I lose it in the field, I keep pigeons for dog training. I can't expect to see the bird back at its, the hawk house
It
if I
won't.
lose it in the field. No, absolutely
They're
not.
done.
More,
They
more
want to be
like,
wild, really.
and people recover them. We have Facebook groups where people will post, I saw this bird sitting on someone's chicken coop or whatever. More likely than not, you lose a bird in the field, it's probably going to stay pretty close if it's a hawk, and probably will be up in a tree, and you might have to go back the next day with a rabbit carcass or a live pigeon and call it down. With a falcon, those things will just take off. And people have, done like they lose it in the field, and these could be a $3,000-$4,000 bird. Also, a emotional investment. They'll go across state lines to chase this bird down. And I've heard stories of birds flying from, like Intermountain Rocky Mountains area down to Mexico. So yeah, they're gone when they want to go. They're gone.
Yeah. So are you banding them? Or if I
Um,
spend $4,000 on it, I probably want a GPS tracker on it, really.
Absolutely. So for any of the birds, a thing that people might not know is not all the birds we have in falconry are from the wild. A lot of them are from breeding programs. And the breeding program in its inception kind of came up about when the peregrine was having all these problems with DDT, and a bunch of falconers started breeding these peregrines and essentially supplementing the wild population, and started a breeding program. And for anyone who's more interested in that, there's a bunch of resources. And the guy who started Patagonia, Yvan Huinard, he was integral in that as well. He was like one of the first California falconers in our state.
Really?
And got into rock climbing to take baby falcons from the nest for falconry.
What? I didn't
cool
know
as
that
hell.
either.
But we definitely, so for those birds that are from a captive setting, whether they're hybrids, like two species mixed together, or something not native to North America, we will put a band on them. And for some of them, there are GPS requirements. You have to run GPS on them. For me, with a wild red tail that I trapped local to me in California, there's no requirement to run GPS, but I thought it was cool as hell, so I spent the money and bought the GPS system.
Why not? So you always need gear, no matter what the sport, really. You know, if you end up doing all the sports, then you just have an infinite checklist of gear that you always need to buy.
100%. I mean, I just bought a new shotgun. I don't need a new shotgun, but I wanted one.
Always need a new shotgun, though.
Yeah.
You know? May not have any good excuse for it, but there's still a need somehow. I understand.
Absolutely.
So you've got a red-tailed hawk right now. I mean, I'd love.
I let mine go. I would if I had the hawk, it would be on my fist for the interview.
Yeah, most definitely.
I had I want to say 3 birds kind of within my periphery in this first year. One of them I gave to a fellow falconer who moved away, and she needed a bird. Hers got electrocuted. Then I had one bird unfortunately pass away, and we couldn't figure it out. And then kind of had another bird for a very short period of time, which was just a rehab bird, like a rescue bird I picked up from a job site. I didn't do anything in falconry with it. I just kind of kept it in the mew, fed it up, and put it back in the wild.
Fun. So you're kind of in the best of both worlds insofar as you're out looking for birds during your day job, and then you've got this awesome. Really, is it a hobby? Is there an end game there for you? I mean,
I would call it all, and this is so super kitschy, and all my friends like throughout the country in falconry would all say it. And I recently wrote an article for my state club's like magazine newsletter. It's definitely a lifestyle. Whereas in upland hunting, even the really dedicated guys, like the hobbyists, you know, people who don't have a 10-dog string, maybe you have 3 dogs, you know, like it's a year-round thing. You're training your dogs, but you still put your shotgun away at the end of the season.
right.
You oil it up and bring it out. I'm lucky right now that I have these passage birds for my apprenticeship, which are birds I can release back. But most people have their birds year-round. They have to deal with them year-round. They have to bring them through the molt, which is in falconry, they'll kind of set up a situation in which the birds are dropping all of their feathers over the summer, growing in a new set for the hunting season. So yeah, it's a lifestyle, and it takes a lot of time, and it's not a shotgun that you put away. It's this like living thing that kind of hates you in a way, but you know, you have a good time with it. And
a wild beast. I mean, you're responsible for a wild beast 24/7.
Absolutely.
Are they like macaws, parrots, like 2-year-old mindset? Is that pretty true for them, or
it varies by species? I wouldn't compare them to parrot keeping, except the falcons are maybe a little bit closer. You're not going to have it free flying in your house, and you're not going to just pick it up willy-nilly. There's a lot of like when you're working with a bird of prey, depending on what species it is, you know, things don't have to be perfect, but you're always aiming for an artistry to it, because there are things that you can do incorrectly that will mess up the bird, mess up your hunting season. So yeah, they're not pets in any way, shape, or form. You might have pet moments, but they're hunting partners.
I understand. Yeah, I understand. So do chicks dig them though?
Oh, girls? I mean, it all depends. I've gone on a couple dates with girls that are all like, "Ooh, like that's so cool," but then you show them the bird, and they're like, "It's looking at me, like I'm afraid." And then, I mean, then there are like girls in falconry, and there are some really rad women in falconry who are obviously into it. But I don't know. I think that it's better to maybe like if you just want to pick up chicks, I'd go get yourself a puppy. Or like a
bird dog,
English setter, like something that looks good when it's grown up too.
I understand. The setters do. The
Oh yeah.
American, all of them. They're all pictured on. You've got this really cool hobby going. We talk about this on the show all the time. Uh, the difference between doing it as a hobby and doing it for a living is literally just one piece of glass. It's a camera.
Absolutely.
You know, I'm curious. Do you see yourself? Is there some kind of exit to where you're doing that full time? Is that your end game? I mean, I see the picture right there on the wall of a falcon. It looks
Oh
like
yeah. I can't know if I can get it up there. Yeah. Um, I would say no. The end game for me is as a biologist and a land manager. I'd like to move more. I'd like to move a little bit away from the work I've been doing and more towards, like restoration practices and implementing USDA Farm Bill stuff just to restore our grasslands and help upland birds. And that's like where my passion really lies. This is just a big part of my life. And the way that I see it connecting is my end goal in falconry is I want to chase upland birds with a North American goshawk over a team of pointing dogs. Professionally, I want to make sure that the habitat and the birds stay there.
great. So it's not often that you get an expert on conservation. Let's talk about that. Really, let's talk about habitat restoration. I'd love to hear your perspective. We talked about this a little bit in episode 1.
You just generally?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
look, I'm giving you the floor. You're an expert, so
So I think it obviously depends on where you are in the country. Um, Things are getting pretty crazy, like politically and ecologically. And I'm in California right now. I don't want to go outside after this interview just because it's probably 110 degrees, which is abnormal for sure. And I just think that, yeah, things are changing really rapidly with, our climate and just kind of the chaos of it all. The one silver lining that I see is that maybe this will force people, especially agricultural producers and people who have a really close connection to the land, whether they live on it, work it, or both, to start doing pretty dramatic, whether it be like carbon capture or revegetation of native vegetation, just kind of jumpstart like a really intense process of rewilding our country for carbon capture
yeah.
and having incentives from the government to do so.
And what does rewilding really look like? You're talking about native grasses, obviously.
So for me and in the scope of work that I do in California, it would be really large scale management of our non-native invasive grasses and a pretty large restoration effort, including, like seed collection, propagation of seed, and then planting of our native bunch grasses to restore a landscape that's more like drought resistant. We historically would have been a major grassland state. People don't think of California as having these large grasslands, but the central part of the state would have been all perennial bunch grasses that would have supported massive flocks of quail, um, crazy amounts of snow geese, which some people would still argue we have. If anything, snows are growing in their population numbers, and yeah, just a lot of ungulates like pronghorn, Roosevelt and Tule elk, and then blacktail and mule deer. All of those populations have been like significantly declined just because we don't have the habitat anymore. It's either been degraded, and maybe someone who's not tuned into what is wilderness or what is a wildland, they'd say, oh, like this looks great. There's no development versus, oh, this is a healthy ecosystem with native flora and fauna.
So it's Manifest Destiny's fault.
Uh, Partially. I mean, there's all in the scope of what I know, which is really the West, there's all these different things that happened. Like the Spanish first came, and regardless of the colonization aspect of it, they brought a bunch of farm animals that pooped out a bunch of grass seed. They also brought a bunch of their own grass seed. And for California, that's really like spelled the end of our native grasslands. It's like you can almost pinpoint it on a map of history. That's when it happened. Is that, oh, all these Mediterranean Spanish like non-native annual grasses came in, like 15 to 1600s. But yeah, I mean, just from what you said, like it's all Manifest Destiny's fault. I don't fully blame that. I feel like that our country has a really complicated history. I just think that the thing we're dealing with now maybe is a little more tied to manifest destiny of just growing and developing.
Right.
And I personally feel like I'm a pretty big advocate in my life and my work against development. Just because we have so much developed, why not work on fixing that
Agreed.
and not ruining, more areas that can be restored to
Right.
serve an ecological purpose?
Right. But we have a housing shortage.
Absolutely. I
You
mean,
know, it's like that.
yeah,
There's the give and take. It's like who's willing to live in a tent, really? And I think you guys have already figured that out in California,
well,
right?
yeah, yeah, there's,
You already have all your pledges. You know exactly who will sleep in a tent. I think that's already
yeah.
happening.
But it's going to shift in California from people who are sleeping in a tent, I think the way you're talking about, under maybe an overpass to someone like me who makes, I think a fine amount of money, but I think all I could afford is a tent.
It's
So just
super
buying a
expensive in
house.
California.
Oh
There's no
yeah,
doubt
man.
about it. A tent that'd be 300K, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Unbelievable. Okay, so falconry restoration. I mean, tell me about your amateur photography. Like, are you actively looking to book gigs, or where are you there?
So it's something I've thought about a lot. Something I would really like to pursue, like pseudo professionally. It would be nice to make a couple extra bucks so I can afford a bigger tent. Um, but where I'm at with it is it's always been a passion of mine. I got into it in high school just as, just a way to photograph my friends. And to preface, I grew up on the East Coast in Connecticut, pretty close to New York, but in a pseudo rural area. Um, so yeah, we'd go fishing a lot. We did a little bit of rough grouse hunting
Fun.
and kind of wanted to start photographing that and then also photograph city life. Came out to California for school, again, just photograph my friends. But as I get more into it, I'm starting to realize that the life that I lead has allowed me into this very interesting niche of like upland hunting and conservation work and the falconry stuff. And yeah, I mean, it's falconry is the coolest thing to photograph. It's pretty hard because everything's moving pretty
Right.
fast. But I would really like to start booking gigs. And if I had a choice, it would be like dog and hunter portraits.
Hey, let's go.
Um,
Hey, let's
which I think
go.
is,
I may know where to find those kind of people. You know, this
yeah,
is a good
yeah.
place to plug that one. I'll tell you.
So I want to grow the photography business, but as it stands, it's just a passion thing. And I just like photographing my life and sharing it with people.
Sure. I like getting behind the camera myself, you know, and there's something to be said, especially when you're outdoors, when you capture that moment. And so let's talk about this. It's called the Walden Podcast. It's Henry David Thoreau. It's transcendental. It's getting out of nature, if you will. Tell me what that means to you, really.
Well, the first thing is I really like the name of the podcast. I think it's a great podcast name, and I'm down with Thoreau. And I would say Aldo Leopold is like a personal hero of mine, which different era, but still same ideology. Um, Getting out into nature for me and just being outdoors, the first thing is it's just my entire life. Obviously, I'm inside right now because it's 110 degrees, but all the joy and all the happiness that I gain is usually from, really enriching outdoor experiences. And I think if I were to describe, like my personal religion or spirituality is that I kind of find that when I'm outside, especially chasing my dogs in a field, optimally on the plains in North Dakota.
Yeah. Throw it in, throw golden hour in there
Yeah.
somewhere. And a
Yeah.
nice sunset. And it is spiritual, most definitely.
Yeah.
You know?
So that's kind of what just the outdoor world means to me. And I guess having a part to play within my life, to ensure that if I have children or just for the next generation, that they can enjoy the same things that gave me this life that I lead, which I think is a pretty wild one. Give them those same opportunities, that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, let's go. Let's go. We'll timestamp that one.
All right.
Let's go back to these Falcons, though. So, and again, I've only been a spectator online, really. I haven't seen it in real life. I'd love to. I'd love to go follow somebody around and watch them run the Falcons. But from what I understand, though, they're kind of like they're kind of like discs in disc golf. like you need a few different ones. Like, and here's what I think I've seen before. It's like, here's my kind of faster flying one, but he doesn't have as thick of feathers, and it's snowing hard, so I'm going to pull out my real feathery one. He's better for the cold weather. Is any of this stuff true, really, or?
Um, to a degree, it's if I could break it down, it would be like this. There are different types of falconers. So it really all depends on what type of game you're trying to chase and where you live, and more especially what type of game you have readily available to you. So the way I would split it up would predominantly be with what you call an off-stringer, which is someone who flies in a scipitar or a hawk,
Yeah.
or even an eagle. They would call them an eagle off-stringer. And those people are usually, you're flying one bird at a time, unless it's a Harris's hawk. And if you're flying a accipiters, most of those people are going to fly one bird. They're going to have one bird. Maybe they'll have two, but they'll have one bird, and that'll be the focus of their attention.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got to move into the.
So you're saying you got your handy dandy falcon? You're
Yeah.
probably not running multiple.
No, and especially not at the same time. But then you have people who are long wingers, and they're flying falcons. And most falcons, if you're flying peregrines or prairies or any of the hybrids, in California at least, you're flying them on ducks. And I don't know if you have. Where are you located?
I'm in Montana.
Cool. Whereabouts?
I'm in Helena, Montana, the state
right.
capital.
Yeah. Out here, we have a really big duck hunting culture, like gun hunting ducks. The falconers that fly these long wings on ducks, at least a subculture, they're like essentially like the kind of greasy Ducks Unlimited guys that you would see, waiting in a sweat line at a public, like a public hunting area.
Oh, you didn't just say that about the duckers.
I mean, I love
the duckers.
I'm one of them.
I'm going to chop that up and replay it 100 times.
Yeah, I'm wearing a California Waterfowl Association hat, and I sat in a bunch of sweat lines. But
in solidarity.
Yeah. So those guys, they're mostly chasing ducks. They're going to fly one bird at a time, but they may have a couple falcons because some of their birds, kind of akin to what you were saying, like this one has more stamina. This one is better at this. This one is faster. They may have a bird that'll like a peregrine that will kill two ducks in a flight. They'll kill one, they'll eat a little, they'll go back up, kill another. They might have another hawk that kills one, and they want to kill a couple ducks. So they will switch them out. They'll have a couple different birds in their car on what's called a cadge. It's on like a slide out thing, like on top of their deck drawer system.
Yeah.
And
another good plug right there.
Yeah.
Get these guys decked to cut the check. Cut the check.
Yeah. I mean, if only I could get him, just give me one.
Yeah, there you go. We're all working towards that, I think.
But yeah, it just all depends on what you're chasing. And for what I want to do and what some of my friends in the falconry community do, it would be focus on one bird, usually a North American or European subspecies of goshawk, catching quail or pheasants or grouse, or they can catch ground quarry as well, which would be like jackrabbits out here or cottontails. And that's one bird, and that bird is going balls to the wall, filling your game bag.
That's cool. I mean, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. I'd love to go tag along on one. Hopefully somebody.
Yeah, I mostly ask where you're at just because I know there is a big falconry community in Montana, but I think most people are flying out towards, I would say, Bozeman and east.
Yeah.
So I would think that like the North Dakota, Montana border would be a really good place to see like sharp-tailed grouse hunting with a goshawk or with a falcon.
Be cool.
Yeah.
I would tag along on one just to see it. The falcons are pretty wild looking, I don't know if it's their beak or their something about their eyes, but they just look kind of scary a little bit, They look like a predator, really.
They are. They only eat red meat.
Yeah. Yeah, you can tell. There's just something about them. How are they intelligence-wise? I'm dying to know. I watched some YouTube video a couple of months ago that said crows have the mentality of a 7-year-old human being. Like, are these birds high functioning, or where are they at really mentally?
They're not. I wouldn't place them close to crows. At least the majority of the birds that we fly. Crows and like all corvids, which in North America would be any of the jays, the crows, magpies, things like that. They're kind of above and beyond in terms of avian intelligence. I've read multiple papers, kind of like what you just mentioned, where one of them was like a crow can remember 200 faces or something like that. And
they know how to use tools. They set up a test with these crows, and they offered them a treat or a tool, and they had taught them how to use the tool to unlock and get a more desirable treat the day before. Every single crow took the tool instead of the treat because they knew they were going to be able to unlock and get a better treat out of it. Like that's the forethought they have. Kind of hard to imagine you can do that,
I wouldn't be able to give any of the birds of prey a like age ranking. Like I couldn't say that they're they're equivalent to a 2-year-old person. It would be pretty hard. Yeah. I think it's just a varying degree. Some of them are more cooperative than others, and they can definitely problem solve. But some of that problem solving might just be intuitive, like intrinsic hunting ability and something ingrained in their genetics.
Right.
However,
wild, if you will.
This is the flip side, and the thing that has really revolutionized falconry, not just in North America, but all over the world, is the species I've mentioned multiple times, the Harris's hawk. They you can hunt them as like an aerial wolf pack. I've seen the most of them, 6 of them flying together. And if I were to call my red tail by her name and try to get her to come back to me, there's no chance that she's flying to my fist. I'd have to show her some meat. She's the one bird that was really good this year was trained to come back to a whistle. So I could whistle at her and she had an association. Right. That means I'm getting a little bit of meat. I'll go to him. Why not? My 2 sponsors in California, they fly 3 Harris Hawks right now. They can just call their names, or if the birds see that the truck that they both drive in is pulling up they have like a bed cap, so they'll put the window of the bed cap open. If they see that, they will fly to the truck and just sit on top of the truck, and they know, like, all right, we're done hunting. It's time to go home.
They're done, and they'll come back. So they are homery.
They're just more intelligent. I wouldn't call them homery. I call them more dog-like.
Okay.
Yeah.
They're pack animals. They're flock animals.
They're pack animals that view the people that they hunt with as part of the pack, and they also have an understanding. It seems like they have more of an understanding of the cooperative relationship. Like they know that, going home means I'm going to get a big meal. Whereas a lot of these other birds, they're really just hardwired predators that are, they do what they do, and you have to work within their world to get them to work with you. Whereas these Harris's hawks are more moldable.
Interesting. So you've got the functional bird, and then you've got the super badass looking birds. Which one do you do?
The badass looking one,
right? Is that the one that looks good when it flies? Is that the one? Probably.
It all depends on what you're into. I think a peregrine falcon or a gyr falcon or even a prairie falcon would give you a really beautiful flight. It's my dream, and if you wanted to look it up, or if any of your listeners wanted to, there's a gentleman named Steve Chingren who has kind of pioneered sage grouse hawking on, I think it's the Big Sandy of southern Wyoming.
Interesting.
And yeah, I would definitely look him up. He has some epic videos, and he's like very well known. But his whole thing, which is just to answer your question of like what's the most badass, what's the most epic. He sends these large falcons up in the air. He has a couple English pointers, sends them out into a field. They go on point, and he flushes up, the largest grouse we have in this country. And then a literal missile comes out of the sky and slams this bird and kills it. To me, that's really beautiful.
Oh my goodness. He got this on film?
When I say a missile, I mean his falcon is the missile.
Okay. I thought you were saying it got collided, like the pitcher threw the 100-mile-an-hour fastball and hit the dove in the air.
No, I mean, the crazy things happen in falconry, and birds die all the time. But just the flight that he's able to recreate consistently is a predatory missile being his bird of prey, his gyrfalcon hybrid, falling out of the sky at over 100 miles an hour and killing a grouse over his bird dogs. And the fact that he can repeat that and it's beautiful every time, to me, that's badass.
Pretty cool.
The thing that really gets my juices going is, and maybe you've heard of this guy on Instagram. He's been a really big help for me getting my dogs into falconry. His name's Tyler Sladen. He goes by Quail Hawk.
Yeah. See, I'm consuming from him. That's everything that he posts is about all I know about the old falcon.
Well, that's a good place to start. He's good for sure. What he does is what my goals are. I live in a state currently with quail, a lot of quail, and I want to kill quail with a bird.
Yeah, let's go.
And dogs.
Why not?
And yeah, so that you've seen those videos. To me, compared to what I just explained, which is the long wing upland flight, what he does, which would be called a direct pursuit, that's what I think is the most beautiful, the most epic, is a bird that is going to take off your fist and just balls to the wall, chase down a quail or chase down a pheasant or a grouse.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, for anyone who hasn't seen it, YouTube it immediately. It's one of those things where it's a sight to behold.
Absolutely.
And having trained my own bird dogs, I know how difficult it can be trying to get them to that point. I couldn't even imagine what it'd be like training these falcons. They're just wild animals. And so
you'll find this funny.
Do you have the leather glove thing? So enough with the softball questions. Let's throw you a hardball question. True or false, the United States federal government is training bald eagles and falcons to take down enemy drones?
I have no idea. But that would be pretty epic. Yeah, I can't answer that with any definite.
Because it's classified? Is that why?
Why, yeah. And also, I don't work for the government.
Okay. Just making sure. We probably all do. We just don't know it, really.
Yeah. I mean, we all do work for the government in our tax dollars, but that's a whole other conversation.
You're absolutely right about that. Yeah. Where do you stand on paying your taxes?
I mean, I do it maybe because I'm afraid of the government.
That's probably the right place to
be. You had asked a question before.
Your leather glove. Do you have the handling glove?
Yeah. I got all my falconry equipment here, and I could show some other stuff, but you would actually mention something before I just wanted to touch on, where you said you couldn't imagine how it would be training a raptor having trained your own bird dogs.
Right.
I think it's easier. Like, significantly.
It's already in their nature to kill them. Is that it?
Yes and no. You can either raise them once they know how to hunt, or once they're little babies, you got to teach them how to hunt. It's genetically ingrained that they want to kill and they want to get their aggression out. But put simply, think of all the different situations you can bring your dog into, whether it be like bringing them to a bar and just teaching them how to be a dog, or even in the uplands, like teaching them how to honor another dog, or all these other things. And there's all these factors. Dogs have much more complex personalities. There are so many good books on training hawks and falcons. You kind of just follow what the book says, and pretty much to a T. And there's like steps, like, all right, at this day, you do this. Then, all right, they accepted food this way, you do this now. And for me, it was really straightforward. I thought dog training was a lot harder.
So tell us, what's your favorite book on the subject? If I were going to.
There are two for anyone who even has an inkling about wanting to get into this. Actually, I mean, I'm big into reading, so I could list off a plethora of books. But the biggest ones are, I think it's called The Falconer's Apprentice. It's by a guy named William C. Oakes. It's a really short little book, and it just kind of talks about what's required for the sport, what type of commitment it is, and then it walks you through every step of training a red-tailed hawk. Then the other one is, I think it's called like the Red-Tailed Hawk Bible. And it has a lot of really cool photos and shows you how to make some of the material objects that are used in falconry. And again, it walks you through every step of training. That book in particular has a really interesting chapter on bringing dogs into falconry. And so those are the two big books. But for anyone who just has an interest in it, and maybe doesn't want to buy the specific I'm going to do this books, I would take a look at any of the books written by a guy named Stephen Bodio. He's a really, really well-accomplished writer. He writes a lot about the American Southwest, but he also writes about falconry and hunting dogs and, yeah, just a life with falcons. And the book I'd recommend is called A Rage for Falcons.
A Rage.
A Rage for
Falcons.
Falcons.
Let's go.
Yes.
That's a name. Is it Range or Rage?
Rage. Like, you had it right. Like,
Rage Against the Machine.
Instead of
Yeah, let's go.
Falcons, A Rage for Falcons.
You already know it's a banger, then it's got to be.
It is. This guy's I plug him because he's my favorite author. I only found him recently, but I just think anyone who's into outdoor writing would really like this guy.
Cool. I'm into it. So let's say I am not going to be an apprentice, but I decided I'm going to go catch a falcon and wing it from the book. One, is that against the law? Two,
yes.
How do I catch one?
So it is absolutely against the law. Unless you're a wildlife rehabber or you work in a field like I do,
the loopholes.
I wouldn't do it unless you want
two loopholes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the two. Okay.
If you're a falconer or if you're like into the wildlife rehab, hawk banding, stuff like that, just leave them alone. Let them be wild. I'll talk about some of the methods to catch him. I almost don't want to now because I don't want any of your listeners to go out.
Good. I ask these questions so they don't do it.
Yes.
I just have to make crystal clear it's illegal unless you follow the protocol. Right?
And, I mean, there are different takes in the falconry community on how much federal oversight or state oversight there should be. But that's a whole other discussion for policymakers.
And I'd love to hear what your position is on this.
My position is I think that it's really maybe over-regulated, but there are some silver linings that maybe would be dealt with, by like internal things if it wasn't super regulated, where I think that it helps weed people out, that you have to take a test. You have to spend a bunch of money to get a license and an inspection. That's just the litmus test for, do you have enough money to support a bird?
Yeah. Are you going to actually care for this? Will you jump through the hoops and prove that you're actually very serious about this, which gives us peace of mind that you'll take good care of it? As a biologist in the field, really, how do you see it becoming less regulated?
Well, the regulations don't have too much to do with the amount of, like, for red tails and other species. It's obviously tied to how many wild birds we have to take from the wild. I need to think about it for a second, just because the two things are almost a little bit diametrically opposed, where in falconry, you're almost ensuring that a bird is going to survive if taken from the wild beyond, it's not going to get killed by a coyote. Well, any of these, it could get killed by a coyote, it could get hit by a car, it could get electrocuted, but its chance of survival goes up a lot when it's in the care of a falconer, because we're choosing to put them into hunting scenarios that we have assessed the risks. Right. Whereas in the wild, they are hunting in scenarios where they don't know what a car is. They don't know what a transformer is. But
what is the typical lifespan when they are in captivity?
It really all depends, but I can give a statistic that for red-tailed hawks, when you take them out of the wild for falconry, you're increasing their chance of survival in their first year by 80%.
There you have it.
So the idea would be, if you have a nest of 5 chicks, 4 of them are going to die.
Year one.
Yeah, year one. Maybe not as babies, but within that first year of life, when they're out hunting on their own, 4 of them are going to die. Yeah. So when we release a bird back into the wild that we've taken, specifically a red tail, it's like you're like releasing an Olympic athlete that's been fed the best food and given the best training and is super fit and has also been brought past that gnarliest time of its life where it's most, susceptible to all these different environmental.
Those are the ones you want to trap, really. You need the one out of the 5 that survived already won the Darwinian game.
100%.
You have the gnarliest one, right?
Yeah.
That's what you hope for.
Absolutely. Where I see things changing as a biologist is that I touched on this towards the beginning, but peregrine falcons were always kind of a big deal in terms of publicity and DDT poisoning.
They're the coolest looking too.
Yeah, and
The
like
white ones with the speckles, right?
well, so peregrines, they can have different types of modeling and chest color based on their subspecies, but they usually have a more tan or black back. They are there, or they could be slate gray even. They're like freaking epic. They're super cool looking, and they're the fastest animal on the planet, technically.
Really?
When they're in a
Fly
dive.
quickly.
Not even, it's when they get up like to 1,000 or 2,000 feet and they fold their wings and fall down. That's when they reach their terminus speeds.
That's cool.
But things have been moving kind of slowly. I know some people have wild trapped them in states like Alaska, but for most of the U.S. states, you can't take them from the wild. And this is something that a lot of falconers really want. They want to trap one from the wild, either release it back to the wild, or they just want a wild bird. They want something that its genetics originate where they hunt. And there's beauty in that. Yeah. And I think where things are changing on the biology side is that some state agencies are now opening up, they're at least opening up a conversation in some of their commission meetings and hearing public comment about maybe allowing for limited takes of some of these birds that were otherwise protected.
Because they're training them to take down drones. That's why.
that could be why. But on a non-conspiratorial point, I guess it would be just that their populations have rebounded. And there are definitely still issues, like a lot of the modern pesticides. We don't know how those affect birds of prey yet. But yeah, just that because of falconers, they've recovered. And the hope is that as falconers, we can, steward them again and take them from the wild and hunt with them.
So let's say I do follow the law, okay, and I become an apprentice. I want to go catch a bird. Walk me through the steps. I mean, is it like trapping pigeons?
No,
I really catch them.
I wish it was that easy. I said earlier, again, there are a couple different traps. The primary ones would be something called a doe gaza, which is a type of net. The one that we use for red tails and American kestrels predominantly is called a bal chatri trap, or a BC for short. Think like a wire cage, and it has a bunch of monofilament fishing line nooses on it.
Okay.
It would have like some rebar around it to weigh it down, and then you could put a bunch of things in it. Like you could put sparrows. You could put. I personally used mice or rats. Some people, and this is like the coolest thing, they will buy a gerbil at the pet store, and they will keep that gerbil for its whole life and train it to be like a trapping gerbil. So it does things that are attractive.
Get out here with this. No way.
I'm going to have to plug another guy who does the trapping gerbil, but for a different reason. I think he calls himself on YouTube Night Crew. And this guy is, it's hardcore for sure. But he hunts in Texas coyotes with...
He would be a Texan. He would be a Texan.
Who hunts coyotes and jackrabbits with golden eagles and then like weird exotic eagles at night with lights off an ATV, and this guy's freaking badass.
So take a step back here. You're telling
me, I want to
do a red tail hawk. I can use a bald freaking eagle or a golden eagle. You're saying if you become an apprentice in the falconry space, you can have an eagle?
Way down the line.
Okay, what hoops do you have to jump through on that?
I got so sidetracked. You're gonna have to chop it up a bit.
That's okay.
To answer the trapping thing, we have this thing that's kind of like a half dome made out of galvanized steel wiring. Put a gerbil into it, and for red tail
gerbil, a lifetime trained gerbil.
Yes,
just to be food for the next thing about to get trained. That's full blown commitment.
With the trained gerbils, they won't feed them as food. The prey items are protected. Like they're protected in the little cage.
I see. You put them in the little ball that they run around in. Is that it?
But they're in this wire cage, and so for the mice that I used, hell yeah, I fed my mice to the bird that I trapped as a little gift. But for red tails, the way I did it was I drove around mostly agricultural areas near me, and red tails are pretty well known for just being like lazy bums that sit up on telephone poles and wait for something to come under them.
Right.
So I would find what we would call a passage, or what in the biology community they call a juvenile red-tailed hawk. Very indicative. They have yellow eyes compared to the adults have brown. They have a white chest compared to a brown chest. And they don't have a red tail. Their tail is white and barred. I would find one on a pole that looked good for trapping. I was specifically going after females, which are a little bit larger than the males. And I would throw out the trap underneath them, and I'd drive like a quarter mile away, turn around, and watch the bird through my binoculars. You had said, is it as easy as trapping a pigeon? And I would say, absolutely not. These birds are not stupid. Like they see that and they have to be pretty hungry to go down to this wire cage with a rat in it and say, like, that looks great. Like, that
I'm just
looks
going for it.
I'm super down. And most of them will like do a flyby and you get really excited, like, oh my God, this is it. This is my bird. And then they scope it and they're like, no, absolutely not.
And so once you add in the I want it to have these colors or I need it to have this variation, you're like, where's my $4,000? I'm just gonna go buy one. Is that kind of the reality, or
you got to trap them as an apprentice, or you can take someone else's red tail, but you're limited by those two species, and you can't buy one from anyone. It would have to be a trapped bird.
I see. So that's probably a good rule.
It's part of the experience. I felt, it's like I went out, I probably saw 300 birds, and only 4 of them were trappable.
Yeah.
So it was really hard. Took me about a month. Put like 1,000 miles on my truck. However,
if you want to own a predator, you have to beat a predator at its own game. Really,
absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's
so. That's how you go about doing it. It's pretty much that's the trap everyone uses, the balchatri, and almost everywhere in the country there are red tails, unless you live in Hawaii, and there's no falconry there. So,
and I guess I just assumed this, so I want to make sure that I'm getting the clarification. But is it 2 years in apprenticeship?
Yes.
Okay. Is there certain boxes that need to be checked? I know you've already gone through a list of quite a few things on how to become an apprentice, but is there certain things you've got to do in order to become a master, or is it more about time?
A little bit of both. So I'm gonna answer that question, and then I'll also add in a little bit of what you asked before. How do you work up to something like an eagle?
Right.
So you got all your ducks in a row. You became an apprentice. You have a sponsor. And let's say you have a bird in hand. You're going to do that first season. And then when it's time to renew your license, most states will have you fill out a game card. That's going to be how many head of game you killed with your bird, where you killed them, how you hunted it. And you're going to have to describe yourself in, about a page of writing. What did I learn this year as an apprentice falconer? How did my animal husbandry improve? How did I, keep my birds healthy and hunting? And then your sponsor will write their version of that. This is what we did together. And then they'll usually end like, I approve David being raised to a second-year apprentice.
There you go. Okay.
After your second year, same deal. And then they'll say, I advocate that David be approved to a general falconer. General falconer, it all depends on where you live, but for the most part, you can own a couple birds, and you can pretty much own anything except a golden eagle.
So you can have a bald eagle.
No one would have a bald eagle in falconry unless you're like a falconry education person, someone who's like doing like school education or runs a falconry center. And again, I don't even know. You might need to be a master to have a bald. But just think about what bald eagles eat: fish and sometimes garbage.
Right.
So I've heard stories of people catching ducks with them, but they're just not well suited to the sport of falconry.
I understand. You need a bird killing bird, really.
A bird killing bird or a rabbit killing bird.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Or a squirrel killing bird.
I'm with you. What about a condor?
No, wouldn't unless you want to go shoot something with non-lead ammo and then let your bird go eat it.
Okay, they're just scavengers too, right? Okay.
And the California condor, which is the only condor we have in California or in North America,
they're endangered.
Super endangered.
Yeah. Have you ever seen one?
I have seen one in Big Sur. I lived on the coast for a little bit, like the coast where they would live, and they're epic, dude. They're amazing, massive.
Really. Yeah, that's super cool.
But yeah, just to sum it up, you're a general for like 7 years. Once you're in your 5th year of falconry, so 2 years apprentice, 3 years as a general, you can then sponsor an apprentice and be their formal sponsor. And then after 7 years, you're a master falconer. The amount of birds you can own increases, and you can start the process if you were crazy enough to get a golden eagle, which is a whole other thing in and of itself.
And that's the biggest eagle there is, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe the Philippines eagle, the Philippine monkey-eating eagle might be bigger. I don't know the answer on that, but it's definitely the largest eagle we have here.
Yeah. I think it is the biggest one. So let's talk about birds of prey and their vision. I've read some really wild things about they have two fovea in their eyes. It gives them the ability to see super far away at hyper detail.
Absolutely.
What do you know about this kind of stuff?
So what you said is absolutely true. It varies species to species on the rate at which, they're able to, like, how you might envision a zoom lens, like a zoom lens on a camera or like a spotting scope can zoom in its magnification. They absolutely have the ability to see much farther distances than we can and pinpoint prey beneath like heavy cover. The thing that I think is craziest about certain birds of prey is that they see a different UV spectrum than us.
Yes.
So
They
they
can
can, in
see
some
UV light and color.
things I've heard are that certain birds can actually see heat signatures and see different UV cues that might show them, oh, within a flock of birds, this is the weak one.
The sick one.
And yes, and they may also, regardless of UV like spectrum, they may be able to pick that out because of their field of vision and what they're able to process. Apart from the actual eye as a like mechanism, accipiters, which is what Tyler flies, the goshawk, the quail hawk guy on Instagram, they have a very high frame rate. So imagine, we might see, I don't know what the exact number is for Homo sapiens being us. I think we see close to maybe like 24 frames a second. I think for like an accipiter, it's like maybe in the hundreds.
Interesting.
So they can almost see things in slow motion.
Interesting. My understanding of the two fovea is that they see a close version and then they see a long version, and they actually see double vision, which is why they move their head like this so they can try to get it in focus.
Yeah, I think my understanding was pretty similar to that, it's hard to even understand how they'd be able to process what they're seeing.
Right.
But yeah, it's that they can both like maybe even have one eye looking at something close and one eye zoomed out pretty far.
Right. Yeah.
Wild.
And so they're shaking their head like this so they can get a clear view of you.
Yeah, bobbing their head.
Pretty wild. Getting close up to one, even when you look into their eyes, it's like I said, I mean, they look like predators, really. There's something aggressive about them, just the way they look. They look like badasses, really.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. I'm into the falconry. The more I hear about it, the more I get into it. So I'd love to tag along one of these days. You just let me know.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever a time I'm out there, I go out to Montana and North Dakota yearly, but I mostly am chasing birds with a dog. But eventually want to be chasing birds with a bird.
Okay. Well, when you want to come to town, let me know.
I will.
I'm gonna go scout the grass. We'll find out where they're at.
All right.
David, thank you so much for coming on, man. I had a great time. We got a lot of good information here. This is
awesome.
This was an awesome episode, really.
Yeah, I'm stoked that you asked.
A lot of great information. I'd love to have you back on. You just let me know if you're open to it.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I'd love to talk birds and maybe next time talk a little bit more about dogs and upland stuff.
Let's do it.
All right.
Hey, thanks for taking the time again.
Thank
have a good evening.
You too.